Good morning, all you Sioux High Earth Science students. Yes, this is Mr. McLeod again, hoping you had a most excellent holiday break and that you're refreshed and ready to go get after it again. We are now in the last week of our first semester. Can you believe it? We'll be having our second 9-week exam during exam week, which starts next Monday afternoon. Our exam will cover glaciers and ice ages, geologic time and rock dating, as well as mass extinctions, and in particular, the KT extinction theory, which is the most widely accepted reason for the disappearance of the dinos 65 million years ago. Now, you have notes and study guides for each of these topics, so I'd suggest that you get them together and start reviewing them now before the exam. We've also taken quizzes that cover that material as well. Now, you can see the exam schedule right here on the screen. So Monday is 7th hour exams, and then Tuesday 2 and 3 hour exams, Wednesday 4th and 5th, Thursday 1st and 6th. So you now have an idea of when your exam is, so you should start reviewing these topics that you see right here on the bottom right now for that next 9-week exam. You've also taken a pre-test on that exam, so you've seen that a lot. Now remember, we do these study guides so that you can study them, not so you can not study them. You're not going to be able to use notes, not going to be able to use study guides, not going to be able to use the internet on the exam. So make sure you start looking over that material now. All right, so now that we have the week's schedule out of the way, let's move on to our next big topic in this class, which is climate, weather, and the atmosphere. All right, let's start with the formation of our atmosphere, because without it, we wouldn't be here, right? Right? If you shook your head yes, good for you. If you shook your head no, then you really need to pay attention. Let's look at the main functions of the atmosphere first, and then we'll talk about where the Earth's atmosphere came from and how it's evolved into our modern atmosphere. Okay, breathing comes naturally. Well, what does the atmosphere actually do for us in terms of breathing? Obviously, everyone has to breathe. Write in your notes that our atmosphere provides the oxygen we need to keep our bodies working. In fact, just try holding your breath for a few seconds and see what happens. And people are not the only ones who need oxygen. All kinds of animals need it too. So without the atmosphere, we would all quickly die. But that's not the only thing the atmosphere does for us. So function number 2 is a radiation shield. Now we already know that the sun's rays are important for us. They provide light and heat, but they also contain dangerous rays that can harm us. Ultraviolet radiation can destroy living cells, causing harm to our skin and leading to skin cancer. So write in your notes that the atmosphere, specifically the ozone, protects us and all living things on the earth by filtering out dangerous radiation from the sun. Also write that the earth has its own Star Trek-like force shield protecting it from potentially dangerous radiation called the Van Allen radiation belts. And we're going to talk a lot more about those in our astronomy section, but you see them here now in the green. These are the Van Allen radiation belts, and you also see the magnetic radiation belts here in these circular lines. These belts shield the Earth like a glass wall in space by holding back radiation that could cause damage. So make sure you get that in your notes. Function number 3 is that our atmosphere acts like a security blanket. Write in your notes that the atmosphere also keeps us warm by holding in the surface heat and by preventing it from radiating back out into space. And you know that we call that the greenhouse effect. In a greenhouse, People grow plants under the protection of glass or plastic, which lets the light come through for the plants to grow, while protecting the plants from the cold. In this way, people are able to grow plants even in cold weather because the plants stay warm inside the greenhouse. That's the way our atmosphere protects us. Write in your notes that without the greenhouse effect of the atmosphere holding in the heat, the earth would be a very cold place. And that it's the same greenhouse effect that reduces the extreme temperatures between day and night. For example, on the moon, where there's no atmosphere, the daytime temperature can be extremely hot and the nighttime temperature extremely cold. Without the blanket of the atmosphere, we might freeze or dry. And we'll talk a lot more about the moon and its structure and how it compares to the atmosphere again in our astronomy unit. Now, atmosphere function number 4, weathering the storms. Closely related to temperature regulation, the atmosphere also gives us weather. Wind, rain, and snow depend on the atmosphere. The atmosphere provides cool breezes on a hot day and rain to make the trees and flowers grow. We know that plants could not grow and animals could not survive without water. Rain provides the water we need, and the atmosphere provides that rain back to the earth. The air evaporates the water from the oceans, carries it over land in the form of clouds, and then deposits that water where it's needed. We call that the water cycle. Now, that water then flows into our streams and rivers and out into the ocean where the cycle is repeated. Without this atmosphere, the water could not reach the farmer's field to grow our foods. Now, write in your notes that very complex weather patterns, including trade winds and jet streams, are part of the atmospheric circulation of the air that distributes the heat around the earth. And also write that weather is a function of our atmosphere. Now, we'll talk again in much greater detail about the weather in coming podcasts. Atmosphere function 5, look out below. Write in your notes that another really important thing that the atmosphere does is to protect us from objects coming toward the Earth's surface from outer space. Every day, meteors enter the Earth's atmospheres. Write in your notes that meteors are pieces of rock that are traveling through space, and that when they reach the atmosphere, most of them burn up due to the friction of the air, and that the ones that don't completely burn up reach the surface of the Earth in a much smaller form. Now, when they reach the Earth, we call them meteorites. Write that in your notes as well. We're going to talk more about meteors and deep space objects later again in our astronomy section. Now, the atmosphere protects us from this space junk that would do damage to us, our homes, and to the Earth itself. Also get in your notes that it's because of the heat created by the friction of the atmosphere that the space shuttle had to be equipped with a heat shield to prevent it from burning up as it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. Also write that this heat caused by friction is dangerous to the astronauts, but is also very important to protect us from things coming from outer space. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's dangerous re-entering in the atmosphere, but it burns up stuff that could potentially do harm to the surface of the Earth. All right, the 6th function of our atmosphere we call plant life. Write in your notes that the atmosphere is also very important for plants because it contains small amounts of carbon dioxide, and that plants use this carbon dioxide along with the sunshine to carry out a process called photosynthesis, where they make their own food. Also write that in this process, the plants convert the sunlight, carbon dioxide, and nutrients from the ground into energy for them to grow, and more importantly, oxygen for us to breathe. That's important to get in your notes. Without enough carbon dioxide in the air, plants can't survive. Also, write that the atmosphere helps plants to grow in another way, that many plants depend on the air to carry pollen from one plant to another in order to create the seeds necessary to grow new plants. Also get down that many of those plants depend on the air to carry the seeds and scatter them around to spread plants to new areas. Flowers and trees and plants that give us food to eat depend on our atmosphere for their very life. Okay, function number 7, getting off the ground. Many plants also depend on insects and birds to carry their pollen and their seeds to make it possible for them to reproduce. This leads to another thing which the atmosphere does for us. Write down that the atmosphere makes flight possible, and that birds and insects could not fly without the air to support them. Without the air, humans would not be able to fly either. The movements of air over the wings of a bird or an airplane creates an updraft which makes flight possible. Without the lift provided by the air, an airplane would never get off the ground, and neither would a bird or a bee. Now the last function, function number 8, is something you don't normally think of. We're going to call it let's talk. So one more thing the atmosphere does is it allows us to talk to each other. If you were talking to your friend and there were no air between the two of you, your friend would not be able to hear a thing you said. Write in your notes that sound waves depend on air to carry them from one person to another. And that when you talk, your vocal cords cause vibration in the air. That vibration is what we call sound. Now the sounds are shaped by your mouth and they travel to the other person's ear. Now the other person then hears what you said. Without the air between you and the other person, you could be moving your lips, but the other person wouldn't hear anything coming out of your mouth. Now, for some people, you probably would be welcoming for that because you don't want to hear what they say. Maybe that's me. I hope not. So the sound of your voice travels to the other person through the air at the speed of about 1,100 feet per second. That means if you are far apart, it takes a while for the sound to arrive, but it wouldn't get there at all without something else between them to carry the sound. We've all watched movies about space travel where we see a spaceship explode and hear the sound of the explosion. Guess what? That wouldn't really happen. Why not? Can you guess why not? If you said because in space there's no air to carry the sound waves, you'd be correct. You'd be able to see the explosion and feel the heat, but you wouldn't hear anything. So write in your notes that we need the atmosphere to be able to talk to each other and to hear the birds and waves and all the music around us. Okay, so that's the 8 important functions of the Earth's atmosphere. Now let's start talking about the formation of our atmosphere, because without it, we wouldn't be here, right? So let's track the evolution of our modern atmosphere for when the Earth first formed 4.6 billion years ago. Write in your notes that the first atmosphere or primordial atmosphere occurred 4.6 to 4 billion years ago, and that it was composed mostly of the gases hydrogen and helium, as you can see in this slide. Now, also write that this first atmosphere didn't last because the Earth was so hot it evaporated these gases back into space faster than the Earth's gravity could hold them. Okay, so that's it for part 1. We've talked about the functions of the Earth, those 8 functions, and we started to talk about the evolution of the atmosphere. So take a picture of those notes, submit them to Moodle, grab the study guide, answer the questions, and I'll talk to you in part 2.